Hello and welcome back to the same game tutorial for Ren'Py, part 11, and let's just jump straight back into it, shall we? So in the last part of the tutorial, we created this animation which is triggered for a group of matching icons on the grid whenever the user clicks on the hint button. In this part we are going to implement two things. One is going to be the game over screen, which is going to be triggered whenever the time has run out. And in the last part I actually misspoke when I said that this game over screen is going to be shown whenever the time has run out or there are no more possible matches to be made. Because what we are going to do instead is that we are going to implement a way for the grid to refill the icons when no more matches can be made and that the user play as long as the time still remains. So to do that we are going to need a function which is going to check if there's any more possible matches on the grid, and if there's not, then we're going to generate a new set of icons to fill the grid with. And since we already have a function which is checking if there's at least two matching icons on the grid, we can reuse that function, and that is the hint function. So we're just going to add a little bit more code to that function in order for this to work. And a good time to call this hint function to check for possible matches is going to be after the user has deleted a group of matches from the grid and the shift icons function has run. So we're going to scroll down into the shift icons function. And here we are going to create a new line after this last line of code, and we're going to say hint, like so. But now we also need a way to be able to determine whether or not the hint function has been called because the user clicked on the hint button, or if the function was called because the user deleted a group of matches. So to do that we are going to create a parameter for this hint function, which we are going to call hint button, and we are going to set this to false in this case, since we are not calling the hint function from the hint button. And then we're going to scroll down into the same game screen, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to say comma hint button is equal to true, like so. So now that we have that done, we want to go back up into the hint function and implement this hint button parameter as an argument. So we're going to scroll back up until we find it up here. So we're going to say hint button, like so. And inside of this function we now want to make sure that if this hint button argument is set to false, then we want to make sure that we are not calling the find matches function inside of these if statements. And that is because in this case we only need to know whether or not there are at least two matching neighboring icons on the grid, and if there's not, then we want to make sure that we are running the setup icons label again in order to create a new set of icons to fill the grid with. So to do that we are going to need a new variable which we are going to set to either true or false to indicate whether or not any of these if statements ran and a match was found for this current icon in the for loop. And if this new variable is set to false, then we know that no matches were found, and therefore we need to create a new set of icons. So we're going to create a new line up here, and we're going to say match is equal to false. So we're creating a new variable that we are calling match, and we set this to a default value of false. And then inside of this if statement down here, we're going to say if hint button. So that means if the hint button is set to true, then we're going to indent this line. So we're going to run the find matches function in that case. But if it's false, then we don't want to run the find matches function, but we want to set the match variable to true instead. So we're going to say match equals true. And then we want to make sure that we are adding these into the other if statements as well. So we're going to copy paste this, like so. So now that we have that done, we want to go ahead and check whether or not this match variable is set to true or false. And if it's false, then we're going to go ahead and run this setup icons label again in order to create a new set of icons. So we're going to create a few empty lines, and then we're going to go inwards all the way until we hit the same indentation as this for loop. And then we're going to say if not match, and then we're going to make sure that we are destroying all of the icons from the grid. And to do that, we're going to use the destroy method for each of the icon sprites. So we're going to create our for loop, which is going to iterate through the icons in the icons list. So we're going to say for icon in icons list. And then we need to make sure that we are checking that the current icon in the for loop is not a non-value in order to make sure that we are actually only destroying the icons that are existing. So we're going to say if icon is not none, and then we'll say icon dot destroy, like so. So then after we have destroyed all of the icons, we also need to empty the icons list. So that is now a new fresh list. So we're going to say icons list is equal to two empty brackets, like so. And then we're also going to redraw the sprite manager object. So we're going to say icons dot redraw, and then we'll put a 0 as the parameter. And then the last thing we want to do is to make sure that we are jumping to the setup icons label. So we're going to say Ren'Py dot jump, and then we're going to give it the name of the label to jump to. So we're going to say setup icons, like so. And now, since we have changed the icons list, we also need to make sure that we are making it into a global. So we're going to say global icons list, like so. So now we have all of the necessary code that we need in order to spawn new icons on the grid whenever there is no more possible matches. So let's go ahead and launch the game to see what this looks like. So let's go ahead and delete a bunch of matches from the grid and see what happens. And as we can see right there, we had a new set of icons spawning onto the grid, which means that there was no more possible matches there. So we know now that this is working correctly. And we can also see for fun that we have 385 points up here, and we have 13 seconds left on the clock. So what we're going to do next is implement the game over screen, which is going to be triggered when the timer has run out. So now let's go ahead and create the game over screen. So we're going to create a few empty lines down here, and then we'll go in all the way in the indentations, like so. And then we're going to say screen game over. And inside of here, we're going to create 3 different frames, and this is going to be quite similar to the Score UI screen that we did, where we created a border frame and then the actual content frame. And we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to create 3 different frames. One is going to be an overlay color, which is going to take up the whole screen and is going to be a transparent black color. The next frame that goes inside of that is going to be the border, and then the last frame inside of that is going to be the background color for the actual content. So the first thing we want to add for this screen is going to be the modal property, and that is because we want to make sure that only this screen is able to be interacted with whenever it is shown to the user. So the icons behind it should not be able to be clicked on, for example, or the hint button. So we're going to say modal true, and then we can go ahead and add the frames that is going to go inside of this. So we're going to say frame. And as I said before, this first frame is going to be a sort of overlay background color, and we're going to make it black. So we're going to say background, and then we'll make it black. So hash symbol and 6 zeros. And then since we want to make it slightly transparent, we're going to give it a 50% opacity. So we're going to write 50 like that. And the next thing is to make this frame fill up the entire screen. So we're going to say xfill true and yfill true. And then we want to add the border frame. So we're going to say frame, and we're going to give this the same color as we did for the Score UI screen. So we're going to scroll down until we find it down here. And so we want this color right here. So we can copy that and then go back up into our game over screen. And we're going to say background, and then we'll add 2 quotation marks, and then we'll paste that value inside of there. And then we want to give this frame a size as well. So we're going to say XY size. And we're going to set it to 500 pixels wide and 250 pixels tall, like so. And then let's give it a padding so that we can make this look like a border frame. So we're going to say padding. And we're going to give this 2 pixels of padding on each side. So we will say 2 and 2, like so. And then the last thing is going to be the align property. And we want to align this frame at the very center of the screen. So we will say 0.5 and 0.5. And now we're going to add the last frame, which is going to be the content of the screen. So we're going to say frame. And the background that we're going to give this is going to be the same as we did in the Score UI screen. So we're going to scroll down. And then we're going to copy this second color right here. And then we'll go back up. And we're going to paste it after we have written background with 2 quotation marks, like so. And the next thing is going to be Xfill and Yfill, and we're going to set these to true again so that this frame can expand to its parent frame size. So we're going to say Xfill, true, and Yfill, true. So the next thing we're going to do is to add some text to this frame, which is going to show the user that the game has ended and what their score is. So let's go ahead and add a title first. So we're going to say text, and then we'll say something like game over. But you can of course change this to something else, such as time is up or anything else that you rather want. And then we're going to give this a size, and let's put it to 30. And then we'll give it a color, which is going to be black. So 6 zeros and a hash symbol. And then we'll give it an align property. And we're going to align it in the center of the x-axis. So we're going to say 0.5. And then on the y-axis, we're going to align it at 0.1, like so. And then we can copy this and paste it underneath. And then we're going to say your score is, and then we'll add 2 square brackets and say score inside of that, so that this will act as a placeholder for the score variable value. And then we'll change the font size to something like 18. And then we want to align this text on the y-axis by changing this 1 to a 4 instead. Now before we go ahead and add the next line of text, we are going to create a new variable. And this variable is going to contain the score type that the user has gotten, which is either going to be low, medium, or high. And we're going to do that by iterating through the scoring dictionary, which we have created earlier. And we're going to check if the user's score is anywhere between the 2 values which we have put inside of lists for each of the items in the dictionary. So we're going to go back up into the start of the screen, and we're going to create a few empty lines. And then we're going to create a Python block. And then inside of here, we'll create the variable, which we are going to call score type. And we'll set this to an empty string to start with. And then we'll create a for loop. So we're going to say for type in scoring. And then we're going to say if scoring at the index of type, and this first index is going to pick an item in the dictionary. And then we're going to add another index, which is going to be one of the values inside of the list. And this is going to be 0. So we're going to check if that value is less or equal to score. And then we're going to say if score is also less or equal to scoring type. And then we'll say 1 to pick the second value of the list. And that means that we are now checking whether or not the score is between the 2 values in the list for the current item in the dictionary. And if that is true, then we're going to say that the score type is equal to type, like so. So now the score type variable will contain the current dictionary item's key value, which is either going to be low, medium, or high. And then we also need to make sure that we are breaking the loop if we have found a score type that matches. So we're going to say break, like so. So now we can go back down into our frames and we're going to add a new line of text. So we're going to copy that and paste it underneath here like so. And then we're going to swap this text to say, you got a, and then a pair of square brackets. And then inside of that, we're going to say score type, and then we'll say score like so. And then we're going to position this text on the y-axis by swapping this 4 with a 5 instead, like so. And then the last displayable that we're going to add to this frame is going to be a button. So we're going to say button, and we're going to give it a background color, which is going to be white. So we'll say background, and then hash symbol and 6F characters, like so. And then we're going to give it a size, so we're going to say XY size. And then we can say that it should be 120 pixels wide and 50 pixels tall, for example. And then let's position this on the screen. So we're going to say align, and we're going to say 0.5 and 0.8, like so. And then we're going to add a piece of text to this button. So we're going to say text, and then we can say, for example, OK. And then we'll align this text in the center of the button. So we're going to say 0.5 and 0.5. And then we'll add a black color. So hash symbol and 6 zeros, like so. And now the last thing we're going to do is to scroll down into our score UI screen. And in here, we're going to swap this null action if the timer has run out of time to instead show the game over screen. So we're going to say show, and then 2 quotation marks, and then the name of the screen, which is game over. So now we can go ahead and save our changes and launch the game to see what this looks like. So now I'm going to go ahead and start deleting a bunch of matches from the grid, and then we're going to see when the time has run out if the game over screen will show. And as we can see now, the time has run out as we have 0 on the clock up here. And this has triggered the game over screen to show. And we can also see that we have a game over title right here, and that our score is 1235. But then on the next line, we can see that it says you got a, and then blank score. And that is because we have defined a way too low range of values to be able to determine what type of score that this 1235 points is. So we're going to have to go back into the code and define a much larger range of values for us to pick from. So let's go ahead and do that now. So here, instead of the start label of our script, we are going to change these values instead of these lists to some higher values so that our scoring system will work a little bit better. And you can of course experiment with these values to get something that will work for your game. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to set the low values to be from 0 to 1000. And the medium, I'm going to say 1001 to 2000. And the high, I'm going to say 2001 to 3000, like so. So now let's go ahead and save and launch the game to see if this works any better. So now let's go ahead and try this again. So now we can see that the game over screen has popped up again, and we can also see that the second text after the title is now working correctly, as we can see it says you got a medium score. So now, believe it or not, we have actually finished this SameGame minigame tutorial where we have implemented all of the things that we had set out to do. And I hope that you have found this tutorial series helpful and interesting. and maybe you have learned a few things that you now can use in further development of your SameGame, and who knows, maybe you would like to implement a SameGame into one of your visual novels. The next tutorial that is coming up on this channel is going to be the drag and drop inventory system, so I'm hoping to get that finished and uploaded soon. If you'd like to support me in making more Ren'Py tutorials, you can always check out my Patreon page, where I for now have one tier available, and if you pledge in that one, then you'll get credited in each of the videos that are coming up in the same month that you are pledging. And you can read more about that on my Patreon page. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.